Namaskar. On behalf of the Bombay Management Association and our partner for this very special program, DBM Dharma Bharati Mission, this is Professor Mani welcoming you for this very special session on the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti. This indeed for us in our country is a great way of remembering the Mahatma as he was very fondly called, a noble soul, a great soul. And today we are indeed honored and blessed to have with us none other than his great grandson, Sri Tushar Gandhi ji. Namaskar, Tushar ji, and most welcome to this program of Bombay Management Association and DBM. As we begin this session, we would like to pay tribute to the Mahatma in our own small way by just playing a small rendition of a very favorite number of his. Let us close our eyes in prayer for a minute. Thank you very much. And it is time now for us to get to know a little more about our illustrious speaker, who's going to talk to us about lessons from Bapu. I guess we've been learning them over the years, right from the time we were in school. But I guess the preachings of the Mahatma are such, they are relevant even today. I want to place on record the wonderful support by this NGO, so famous, so reputed, the Dharma Bharati Mission, and a special word of thanks to Sri Paramjit Singh ji, the president of Dharma Bharati Mission, and I'd request him to say a few words and also introduce the illustrious Sri Tushar Gandhi ji.
Thank you, Professor Mani. It's a pleasure being a co-host for this wonderful program. Welcome Tushar ji, and thank you very much for always being there for us. The entire DBM family knows that Tushar ji has been a part of DBM since its very inception. And in fact, he was one of those whom we contacted when we were making the constitution of DBM. His simplicity and humbleness has continued to inspire us and motivate us, and in our attempt to serve the society. So a very warm welcome to you, Tushar ji.
Thank you very much.
And to all the DBM friends also, a very warm welcome, the members of DBM extended family who have joined today for this talk. At DBM, the founder trustees, I have always derived inspiration from Bapu's famous saying, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And our methodology, that is a begin with self, begin small and begin today, is also inspired by Bapu's saying about be the change that you want to see in the others. So DBM serves all sections of society, irrespective of caste, creed, and religion. And even amongst them, in deciding whom to serve and how, we are again guided by the Bapu's famous talisman principle, which says, and I quote him, I will give you a talisman whenever you are in doubt or when the self becomes too much with you. Apply the following test. Recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man whom you may have seen, and ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him. So DBM has not only learned from Bapu, but is actively implementing those learnings in our day-to-day working. We work in the poorest slums and teach the poorest students. Govandi, Trombay, and in fact the entire M ward where we work has the lowest human development index in Mumbai. And the children are so poor that the midday meal that we give them is often the only proper meal that they get to eat. So by following this simple but pertinent talisman principle, we are able to impact and help some 10,000 people every year from the bottom of the pyramid. And this we feel is a better celebration of the life of Gandhiji. And today we again rededicate ourselves to this mission on his birth anniversary. Thank you again and welcome again Tusharji. Introducing Tusharji is, everybody knows him, but a formal like Professor Mani has told me. Just 1 minute. I was. तुषार जी अपने बारे में आप ही बता देंगे कि मैं ही बता दूं फिर से?
आप बताएंगे तो शायद मैं उसको डिनाई कर सकूंगा. अगर मैं बोलूंगा तो फिर मैं डिनाई नहीं कर पाऊंगा.
नहीं बिल्कुल. तुषार जी is the founder president of Mahatma Gandhi Foundation. He is also the president of Lok Seva Trust and Director General Research Foundation. Of course, he's a narrator of history, a Gandhi guide, and a very famous author. He's written numerous books. One of his famous books is Let's Kill Gandhi, and which has now recently been translated in Hindi, I think. So,
yes, it's soon to be released in Hindi also.
Hindi also. So, and of course, as Professor Mani mentioned, he is the great grandson of Mahatma Gandhi himself. And we are very fortunate to have you. And now I hand over the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your generous, as always, introduction. I'm going to just add one more line to my introduction, because generally I'm only introduced as the great-grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. But I equally cherish and honor my maternal lineage, the lineage of mothers that I have. And so the other introduction that I like to give is Tushar, Sunanda, Sushila, Kastur, Putli, Gandhi. The mothers who have been equally important in making Bapu and me what we are today. So just to add that much to a very generous introduction that you did as usual, Paranjit Singh Saab. And now, if with your permission, I will share a few thoughts about it. And today, I would love to talk about the relevance of Gandhi in our current present times, because all of us are very intimidated by this very strange lifestyle that has been forced upon us. We are social animals, and suddenly being social seems to be a very perilous thing to do. We are outgoing people by nature, and suddenly we have to isolate ourselves to save ourselves, and it is a necessity. So I will not ever suggest that we should take liberties with it. We can't take liberties with it, because there is no second chance. It's very fortunate if we survive, if we are infected, but it is not guaranteed that we will survive if we are infected. And so it is essential that we practice social distancing and isolation and insulation and all those things for ourselves and for our families, and in doing so for our neighborhood and localities also, so that we do not become the cause of the spread of the infection. It is not, this COVID infection is not something that is new. It's not that mankind has for the first time experienced such a pandemic. Over time, there have been many epidemics and pandemics. And when I was a child, the situation was such that there were epidemics that were seasonal. As soon as monsoon came, diarrhea and dysentery and cholera and things would be expected. And as children, I remember in schools also, in those periods, there would be vaccination drives happening and all that. So we are not as if we have never experienced an epidemic. What is different today is that the spread of this pandemic is what has alarmed all of us, because even when we were afflicted by the Spanish flu, it took a long time. It was one of the first known pandemics, but it took a long time to travel through the entire mankind. But COVID has, surprised us with the rapidity of the spread of its infection. And I very firmly believe that if anything is to be blamed for it, it is the lifestyle that we had adopted, which has caused this kind of a rapid spread of the infection. And it's not a mere allegation. I will back it up with facts, because in recent times in Africa, in parts of Africa, there was an outbreak of Ebola virus also. And it was as dangerous as COVID is said to be. But the world over was able to contain that virus in a certain area of Africa itself, and we were able to cope with it. That virus was not allowed to spread the way COVID has been. And COVID has spread because even though when we knew that there was a new kind of virus that was spreading, we thought it can't go beyond Wuhan. Then we thought it can never go beyond China. Then we thought China and Italy were the only ones that were going to be affected by it. We were all safe from it. So the precautions and safeguards that were necessary were never implemented. And they were not implemented because we were greedy. We were so greedy about goods from China. We wanted the China trade so desperately and badly to support the materialistic lifestyle that we have adopted for ourselves. That we said, nay, how can we stop the trade and commerce with China? We require all those goods. We didn't realize that when we require those goods, then they would not come alone. The infection would come with it, because intentional or unintentional, you have no control over a virus. You don't know from where it can come and how it multiplies. It doesn't mean that you need to get a plane load of virus to infect everybody. It can be just one patient who is enough to cumulatively affect the entire society and country and city. And that is what has happened. And that is what has happened. And so the first thing we have to realize is that if this became a pandemic, it was because of us itself that it became a pandemic. And then once we start looking at that, then we will start realizing that in future, what is it that we need to do to avoid such a catastrophe from hitting us anymore. Because if suppose if it is alleged the COVID virus is a man-made virus, then in future the possibility is that more radicalized mutants of that virus will also be developed to threaten humankind itself. And so we need to be prepared that when that happens, it does not spread to across the globe as easily as this one has happened. But now we are also being traumatized by the temporary lifestyle that we are forced to obey. And I'm sure 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, sociologists and psychologists and psychiatrists will, after having studied the effects of the virus and the isolation and the quarantine, social distancing is done on the psychology and psychiatry of human beings, there will be we will come to know about new syndromes that will affect our mental health. They're already affecting us. depression is becoming rampant because we don't know what to do. We feel oppressed all the time. Every time somebody rings the bell of my apartment, I'm worried. I think, my God, will the infection now enter my house? Which never used to happen before. So am I going to be that kind of that so much intimidated by it even later on? Because there will be a time when we will conquer COVID and we'll have tablets and medicines for it, and there'll be conversations like saying, "Aaj tabiyat thodi theek nahi hai, COVID ho gaya tha, par dawai le li hai aur ab theek lag raha hai." It's bound to happen. It has happened in before, and it's bound to happen. But what is important is how we treat this and how we survive this. And do we become better after this, or we become worse after this, or we remain as we were, unbothered about the consequences? And this is where the Gandhian ideology steps in to provide help to us, provide strength to us, and provide a better option to us. And it is built on three qualities. One is prudence, two is preservation, and three is service. And I'm going to illustrate a few examples from Gandhi's life. In Bapu's life also, he lived through many epidemics and the pandemic of the Spanish flu. And the pandemic of the Spanish flu came very close to him because he lost his eldest daughter-in-law, his first son's wife, and her infant child to the pandemic. They were both infected and they both died. And so the grief of loss was also experienced by Ba and Bapu. But as was their practice right from the time they were in South Africa, whenever an epidemic broke out, taking care of themselves, they plunged into the service of society. And Bapu raised a whole corps of volunteers from the Phoenix Ashram who would go into the society and provide relief and do all the work that was necessary to mitigate the effects of the epidemic, and do all the jobs that were essential to do. They were not medical personnel, but they provided medical relief by assisting the doctors who were overworked. Today we see that our medical facilities are so inadequate and our medical workers are so overburdened. But if we decide that we can help, provide help, and take up the non-medical duties that they have to also perform while performing their medical duties, we will enhance the ability of the health workers to concentrate on just the remedy and treatment of the patients. And we all can do that. But we are apprehensive. How can we go to a hospital? We might get infected over there. But if we work prudently, we don't have to be worried about it. And it wasn't as if Gandhi and his workers did not catch the infections which they were working while the epidemic was going on. They lost some of their volunteers also. Some fell ill, they were nursed back to health. And it can happen with us also, that we can also be nursed back to health. But we must have that devotion of service if we are to be productive in these times. And it is our duty, it is our beholden duty to do whatever we can in these times. And it also then gives us an occupation while we are frustrated by being not able to work. It's fortunate that we have technology, and so we can communicate with each other. But this is a very artificial way of connecting and communicating, because communication involves all the senses: seeing, listening, hearing, feeling, even smelling. And I crave for that kind of communication because I'm very scared. If I get used to this communications through technology, will I be then able to face actual people and interact with them and talk with them? Or will I always say that, no, let's only have a virtual meeting, we'll do a virtual meeting. You stay in your house, I'll stay in my house. That's an artificial thing. And doing that means I am enslaving myself again. So this was about the service that we were doing. And Bapu not only did service in epidemics or pandemics, but even in crisis situations like wars. And in two wars in South Africa, he and raised a whole group of relief workers who went into the war front and worked to provide relief to the wounded soldiers in the midst of an ongoing war. While bullets were flying all over, while bombs were exploding all over, this corps of Indian stretcher bearers and ambulance corps was going through the battlefront, picking up the injured, treating those with minor injuries with first aid, and evacuating those who needed to go to the field hospitals. And the report states that sometimes they used to hike 20 miles carrying the wounded because the field hospitals were away from the war front. And after leaving the wounded, they would go back to the war front to serve the others. But even though he entered the war on the side of the British, he served all the wounded. He did not look at uniforms. He did not say that I am on the side of the British, so I will treat British wounded. He and his band of people picked up every wounded soldier on that battlefield. And it was only when they reached them to the military hospitals that the doctors told them, but this is not a British soldier, this is a Dutch soldier, and he's an enemy, so we will not treat him. And at that time, Bapu reminded the doctors about their Hippocratic oath and said that for you, he's just a patient who needs to be treated. The other identity is of no significance or concern to you. And that is why when they started intervening in the war, soldiers on both sides decided that these people might come and help to us. So they avoided firing in the area where these people were acting. And this was the goodwill that they built up. We can also do these things. Okay, we might not be able to go right into the hospitals or into afflicted communities, but in our own neighborhood. You know, today what has happened is if we find out that our neighbor is infected, we think, अरे इससे दूर रहना पड़ेगा, कहीं हमें infection ना हो जाए. And that's prudent, you know, that is prudent thing to do. But remember that at that time, your neighbor is feeling isolated and very, very insecure because they think they are all alone. They're not allowed to go out of their homes. They're not allowed anything. And at that time, if we were to do some kind gestures, like send some flowers to their home, send them every day, send them a goodwill message, or if possible, cook a meal for them and leave the tiffin at their door, informing them that I have left food for you, please pick it up and eat. Think of the therapeutic importance of such gestures, because in illness, as much as medicine helps, good gestures also help. Kindness also helps in the cure and recovery. And think of it, one small act of kindness will keep a memory in that person's heart that when I required, this family or this person came to my aid. And then kindness will grow out of it. And we will do something productive. We will do something beneficial to us. So we will use our time beneficially and we will serve somebody who is in need of that service. So these are some things that we can do. Gandhi also used, he also suffered other kind of isolations when he was in prison. And he was kept in solitary confinement, so in South Africa and in India. And so that was as much of social distancing and isolation as we are suffering today. But he utilized that time also productively. While he continued to spin khadi and produce cloth, he also spent that time to audit his own life up to then, to find out for himself his mistakes and his weaknesses, and to spend that time in introspection so that in future he would improve on that. He also spent that time in creative pursuits. Some of the best of his writings happened when he was in isolation. The first was, and at that time, because international travel had to be done by ship, on a trip from England to South Africa, 20-day trip, when there were small ships which were unstable also, so if they were rough seas, one was confined to one's cabin, one could not go out. So it was also an isolation period. And on one such trip, Bapu wrote what has come to be known as one of his seminal works, the work on which his ideology was built, Hind Swaraj. It's one of the most astute writings of Bapu on his belief and his ideology. And if we study Hind Swaraj from the context of our times today, we realize its relevance. Because if you just read the words, you will think that it is of no consequence because it's archaic and anti-developmental and we can't do without that. But if you read it and then think about the situation today and what bothers us so much, you will realize that it was so far-sighted. It's now more than 100 years since Hind Swaraj was written, but it was so far-sighted that it could have been written for today's context. And so while we are not being able to do our regular work, when we have free time, instead of wasting it on WhatsApp and social media, if we were to write, we were to create something, music, art, anything of that sort, any of the creative pursuits, it will give us satisfaction, we will produce something, and we will be occupied in a better activity than just whiling away the time and letting it oppress us. And this is the relevance of Gandhi that we must all appreciate. Later on, when he was in prison in Yarwada, he wrote his treatise on the Bhagavad Gita. And all the prisons that he was put in, it is very unique that if you look at the correspondence he did from those prisons, his address would always say, Sabarmati Mandir se, Yarwada Mandir se, or Aga Khan Mandir se. He treated his prisons as temples, temples of learning, temples of introspection, and temples of creation. And if we also treat this period as a penance, as a tapasya, we will be much better equipped to survive this period and go back to being in our normal life when it returns to us. And this is what is most important of Gandhi, because in every situation, there is an aspect of him that becomes relevant, becomes important for us, from which we can learn and overcome that situation. And I think that is why whenever we are in peril, we remember Bapu and go back to him and try to find some solace, some solution from him. And this is what we must always remember, and that is how we must adopt Gandhi. And that is why I always refuse to acknowledge him as Mahatma. Because I believe that mankind has found Mahatma as an excuse to convince themselves that he could do all that because he was a Mahatma. We are just mere mortals, insignificant. So we can't do anything. So best to put him on a pedestal and worship him and forget about everything else. It's just a mere excuse, and it is the greatest disservice to that individual, because unless we understand that ordinary human being that Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was, and then study his entire life, we will realize that every moment of his living life was spent in the pursuit of being better than what he was in the previous movement. And that is where at one stage of time, people started considering him to be a Mahatma. But he remained Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, and today, if he inspires us, then he will force us to look for the Mohandas within our own selves, the Gandhi within us. Because as he believed that in every human being there was a good and a bad person, and the person became what was dominant at that point of time. So we all, if we believe Gandhi was good, then we must all believe that we have a Gandhi within ourselves. And if we encourage that Gandhi to become dominant in us, we may not become Mahatmas, but we will definitely become better people. And to me, that is the most important lesson that I can learn from Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi Bapu. And I think that is the most important that humankind must learn from Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I know we have to have a dialogue and there is a time limit. So I will stop now, and thank you for BA to BMA and DBM both. DBM, of course, is my family, so I don't have to thank them, but this is a formal occasion, and so formal thanks must be given.
Well, thank you very much, sir. It is our honor, and we are obliged to have you with us in our presence this afternoon. Indeed, very grateful on behalf of DMA. I think some of the lessons which you shared with us were so inspiring, and perhaps true to Bapu and the way he lived. They were so simple and so impactful. So we really appreciate this dialogue with you, and I'm looking forward to our respected audience to share some of their views, their questions. I can see some of them are already here in the chat box, and I'm going to straight away get into asking some of these questions to you with your permission.
Sure, sure.
All right. Could you correlate Bapu's teachings with this concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat?
Well, that was one of the cornerstones of his belief, the Atmanirbhar or Swadeshi movement. If you look at the ideology of Khadi, unfortunately, we have restricted Khadi to becoming a fabric. But Khadi is not a fabric at all, it is a philosophy. Every endeavor that empowers the human being is Khadi. And what has happened, and this pandemic has brought it very close to us, how we have completely failed in our model of development. When COVID happened, because we had ignored Bapu's plea to make every village a center of production, and we only concentrated industry in the big cities and metros, we saw that the migrant workers, the casual laborers, did not have occupation where they had homes, did not have homes where they had occupation. And so when the occupation shut down and they found themselves destitute, they had nothing but to desperately, in a panic-stricken exodus, go back to their homes. And now the question is, how do they survive over there? Because there is no work over there. And so it becomes very important that we realize what Bapu said. And even now we start working towards creating every village into a production center which produces, empowering its own residents, and then supplies for the needs of the big metros and establishes that kind of a synergic industry. And that, I think, should be the spirit of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Otherwise, these are mere slogans which matter nothing to the real people who really need that. And this doesn't actually require a government program to do it. This can happen in a voluntary manner, in a much more sustainable manner, if we take the responsibility of patronizing the village industry. Just to share it with all of you, and with the DBM family, I've shared this many a times, but if we take a vow, we take a pledge that at least once on one occasion in a year, every member of our family will buy a village product, a product from the village industry, a product produced by our craftsmen. It will make a tremendous difference to their sustainability and their livelihood. And it will not make much of a difference to us if we spend that money in that manner. And I am sure you will never ever feel cheated on that, because there will be a passion in the making of that object. Whatever it is, whether it is a toy, whether it is a cloth, whether it is a consumable, whether it is a food item, you will find care and love as two ingredients in their production. So even if we do just this much, we can sustain a village industry and then encourage more and more village entrepreneurship. Today, what is required is to encourage and support village entrepreneurship. Enterprise within villages. Every village can do that. But the model will have to be customized to the requirement of that village. It cannot be prepared by a Babu sitting in Delhi. It has to be customized for the uniqueness of that village where it is going to be implemented. And if it is done that way, then success will be guaranteed. Because the world over today, people want sustainable products, products manufactured in a sustainable system, products that are organic, products that are non-violative. And the Khadi ideology is best to supply those needs. So yes, that is very important.
Sir, considering that social media is a way of life and has its own positives, how can we channelize it in a more constructive manner? Would you share some of your thoughts and experiences?
Well, I think social media is something that is definitely a boon. I would not outright condemn it, but it is also an opiate. It is a very addictive thing, the frivolous side of social media. And so, even before when I was growing up, morning meant rushing to the door and picking up the newspaper. And of course, because father had precedence, we had to hand it over to him. But as soon as he read it, we would get it to read. Today, even if I wake up in the middle of the night, I feel around my bed to see if my smartphone is near me. And if it is handy, then I'm tempted to open WhatsApp and see if somebody has left a nice joke for me or a nice forward for me, which I can send to 20 people more. This is addiction. This is a narcotic that we have been addicted to. And when it becomes a narcotic, it cannot do good. So this enslavement of social media has to go. Just now, I'll tell you my situation. If I wasn't on camera, I forgot to keep my phone close to me. And I can see it from the corner of my eye. I can see that it is out of my reach. And I have a itch in my palms to go there and pick it up, because now it is half an hour since I last saw my social media, and that is a danger of social media. Unfortunately, all of us are using that social media for what it should not be used for. But having said that, there are positives of that social media also. We can use it to communicate effectively, positively, and use it to educate. It is being used to educate. But it is that WhatsApp university of lies and falseness that is rampant on there. And so these things we must keep into consideration and remember that when we tell our children not to do that, we already have a smartphone in the other hand. And that child is not going to believe you, because he or she will also see कि मम्मी पापा हमको तो मना कर रहे हैं, लेकिन उनके हाथ में तो उनका स्मार्टफोन है, उस पे WhatsApp खुला हुआ है. So this is what we must guard against.
Sure, as Bapu used to say, are you a role model? And only then you have the ability and the right to advise others.
Absolutely.
Another interesting question. Could you give us a little background on what were the thoughts that led to the book, My Experiments with Truth?
I think Bapu was never one to tell his own story, but there was a very growing demand from his associates and followers that he write his story in his own words, because by then there were already a couple of biographies of him written by others. And he used to be very amused because, as it is, biographies would be more eulogizing than factual, because it would always paint a grander picture of the object, or if you wanted to demolish an object, it would be a abusive kind of a story. But autobiographies could become authentic, and so finally Bapu gave in to that demand, and he wrote his story up to the 30s. So the autobiography only goes up to the 30s, and he wrote about it. And because he believed that his life was an ongoing experiment that he was conducting himself, the appropriate title for it was My Experiments. And because he held truth to be equally important, and truth was the cornerstone of his entire ideology, he named it My Experiments with Truth. It's a very brave document. If you read it, you will realize and wonder how somebody could write so negatively about their own self, because it is full of his weaknesses and admission of his faults in the life. But what was unique was that once that admission was made of the weakness or the fault, there was also a reaffirmation that in his entire life, that mistake would never be committed again. That weakness would never remain with him ever again. And that is where what is the unique charm of his autobiography, the story of my experiments with truth. And he continued to experiment with his own truth, his practice of that truth, to keep convincing him that he was not straying from the path. He was not committing a mistake, but because once you convince ourselves, we convince ourselves that we are perfect, then we don't bother to keep finding out that if we remain perfect or not. Because we say, "Arey, मैं तो perfect हो गया, अब तो मैं कुछ भी कर सकता हूँ." So even after he wrote that autobiography, the last few years of his life were also an ongoing audit and experiment of his life.
Great. So the next question is, we seem to be on a consumption-driven growth economy. What are your views on the same?
No, I think I answered this question right in the beginning of my talk when I said that even the spread of this virus and the pandemic, its global effect, is because of the consumerist slavery that we have subjected ourselves to. And because I was given the example of the smartphone, I'll still give one more example of the smartphone, that as soon as we buy a new model of the smartphone, the very next instant, we are looking at Google to see when the new updated model is going to be released. No matter if that smartphone can last us for 4 years or 5 years or even 2 years. If we realize that within 2 months there is a new and better model coming out, we want that also. We want to possess that also. And this is greed at its ultimate. And this is the sign of consumerist slavery that we have enforced on us, that we have become slave. I remember in my childhood, we used to get new clothes twice a year. One pair of clothes on the birthday and one pair of clothes on Diwali or Eid or Christmas. And the bonus was if there was a wedding in the family, and we used to all wait for that कि अगर शादी आती है family में तो नए कपड़े बनवाने ही पड़ेंगे, हमको नए कपड़े मिलेंगे. But today look at the trend. Every party you have to have a new outfit. No matter if your almari is overflowing with clothes, but if you wear the same clothes to the party, everybody will say ये यार ये तो फटीचर आदमी है, पिछली पार्टी में यही कपड़े पहन के आए थे, इसलिए मुझे नए कपड़े चाहिए. So these are the signs of our consumer slavery that we have, the slaves that we have become of consumerism. Otherwise, I used to remember my mother used to tell me that these clothes are good enough to wear. When they are new, you can wear them on occasions, and as they will start becoming older, they can come into your day-to-day wear. And there was a time when if you had an older brother, you used to wear the older brother's hand-me-down as you grew. And there was no shame in that. We accepted that system. But today, you do that in your family, and your children will tell you that you are an uncaring, ungrateful parent. And you will also not do it saying कि यार मेरी इज्जत क्या होगी, बाजू वाले कहेंगे कि यार पुराने कपड़े पहनाता है अपने बच्चों. So this is what has led to our enslavement in consumerism.
So would you suggest some guidelines as to how we instill these Gandhian values in the younger generation?
It can only happen if we practice them in our own lives and if they see us practicing it. Because as Bapu said, an ounce of practice has more effect than a ton of preaching. And Bapu's success was because whenever he asked his people to do something, the people saw him practicing that beforehand itself. When he asked people to adopt Swadeshi, they could see that on his own self, there was nothing that was Videshi. Today, when a leader wears Ray-Ban glasses and has a Mont Blanc pen in his pocket and then tells us that we must live simply or use Swadeshi, it is very difficult to believe because you see all the other stuff on that person himself. And that is what also matters in parenting or in teaching. If the teacher is practicing what the teacher attempts to instill in the youth, then the youth will adopt it much willingly and easily, rather than mere preaching of words and saying, "Nahi, ye sab galat hai," and then the children seeing them do the same thing which they had said we should not do.
So would you suggest a few ways in which we can discover the Gandhi in ourselves?
I think it requires honest introspection. It requires honest introspection and the belief that we as individuals matter. We have to have that belief in our own selves that every individual matters and we as an individual also matter. And change happens only from the small actions of individuals which have a cumulative effect. And so if we are able to start thinking that way, then automatically the looking inwards attitude will happen. Bapu used to always say that he had a inner voice which guided him and counseled him. We all have that inner voice within us, but we have deafened our ears to that inner voice. You remember one thing, that you make a mistake, you say यार मैं आज सो नहीं पाया यार, मुझे कुछ चुभ रहा था. वो कोई कील नहीं होती, वो अपना कॉन्शियस होता है, अपना जमीर होता है जो अपने को छुपता है और कहता है कि यार तू दुनिया को बेवकूफ बना ले लेकिन मुझे नहीं बेवकूफ बना सकता, तूने ये गलती की है. And that is our inner voice that we should have the ability to listen to all the time. If we do that, that inner voice will never ever betray us.
Great thought. There is a reference to a program which used to be held in the 70s by Gandhi Samiti, taking Gandhi to schools.
Yes.
Is it still continuing, or what is the scenario?
In a small way, it is still continuing. The tragedy of that program was that it was it was organized and handled by Gandhians who lived with Bapu and continued doing that work. And they never created a cadre to replace themselves. They thought they would do that all the time. And so when they started dying out or became infirm, the program also suffered, but it still goes on. Mani Bhavan Gandhi Sangrahalaya still continues to hold programs for the entire month of October. in which they have elocution competitions and debates and poetry recitations and drawing competitions and a lot of things, essay writing and a lot of things for primary school children. And the children come to Mani Bhavan and they are exposed to Gandhian thought, and then they produce things and they are judged on that. Mumbai Sarvodaya Mandal does a lot of work in colleges and things amongst the youth, and especially the youth that works in NSS, National Social Service Schemes. They do a lot of work there. They go to prisons and work amongst prisoners also in instilling the Gandhian thought in the minds of the under trials and the prisoners. So they go to many prisons all over Maharashtra. It happens in other places also. Gandhi Research Foundation, of which I am a director, conducts a Gandhi exam amongst school children, and there are almost 4 lakh children involved in that examination every year. So in its own way, it happens. It's not as significant as it should be, but it still happens.
Sure. I think more and more people who are in this audience should draw some inspiration from this and try to take it to their own organizations, small or large, so that we can spread this message more widely. We have with us one of our senior BMA functionaries and a past president, Mr. Ernest Fernandez. Mr. Fernandez, over to you. You could ask a question, make an observation. I have already unmuted you.
Oh, thank you. As always, Mr. Tushar Gandhi is so inspiring. Whenever I hear him, I feel so elevated. I was only wondering, with technology taking over the world, the most valuable companies are technological companies today, the highest valuations. Technology seems to have taken over our entire life. I was only wondering how Bapu would have been, how comfortable would he have been when technology has also had such serious repercussions on our lives, with regard to employment, with regard to social ability and so on.
My answer to this is what Bapu said in his life. He said that I am not against technology, but I am against technology that substitutes human ability and makes humans redundant. And especially in a country like ours, where employing individual human beings is a responsibility. We need to provide occupation to every individual. There, automation becomes a crime against people. And so he would have opposed that. And that is where he wanted to create a whole model of decentralized production or decentralized industry, so that it could never be considered that its production would become automated. And so that was the difference he would have made between modern technology. The technology that makes human beings redundant, he would have objected to. And the greatest threat to humankind is coming up. It's looming large on the horizon, which we are all neglecting, is artificial intelligence. Because automation is only going to make us physically redundant. But when artificial intelligence reaches the level or crosses the level of human intelligence, then we will intellectually become redundant. And I keep praying to God that that doesn't happen, at least in my lifetime. Because if that happens, then what will life matter? How will we matter at all? And so I very strongly believe that he would have agitated if India went that path. Just today, I read on social media, I read an article on social media which said that India has the opportunity to become the hub of development of artificial intelligence. I think that would be the most dangerous thing to happen. It might be commercially very good for business people, but it would be a curse on humankind. And I think if Bapu was there, he would have launched an agitation against that. That's my belief. Of course, you must always remember that I am only interpreting Bapu. I cannot say, because that man changed so much that it was very difficult to give a predictable response from him. But for this, I'm very certain that he would have endorsed what I say on his behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think
Indrapalji, yes. Yeah, Indrapalji.
Yeah, yes, please. Tushar, about the rampant inequality that we have in our country, it's a huge issue.
Yes.
And today we read that we have bought 8,500 crore worth of aircrafts, for the VVIPs to fly about. So I think, haven't we got everything upside down in view of this?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this pandemic, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, so first, Bapuji's perspective on inequality. I mean, what could be a remedy from his point of view? Because we ought to reduce, otherwise we're heading for a very kind of civil war kind of a situation.
Absolutely.
In the coming years. Yeah.
10 years ago, a visiting American professor of economics had asked me this question. He said that in economics theory, we have a definition of a list of symptoms which says that even if any one of those symptoms was prevalent or present in a society, that society was due for a revolution. And he read out the whole list of symptoms that were supposed to be the factors that would cause a revolution. And he said, I have been traveling throughout India for the past 1 month. And I have noticed each and every symptom of an impending revolution in Indian society. Inequality, disparities, everything. Biases, persecution, just the complete lack of resources. Just look at this. What Dharma Bharati Mission is doing in Mumbai, the city of dreams, has a whole population which is so deprived that they are dependent on a meal from the benevolence of Dharma Bharati Mission. What good is that rich? What good is the wealth creation if even for the city we don't make a difference? And so this is bound to happen. And unfortunately, those who have the abilities and those who have the greed will fly around in planes where people die because there's a lack of ventilators and medical facilities. So those inequalities we have come to accept. And my answer to that American economics professor was an escapist answer. I said that most likely that the revolution is not happening because we have a belief in spirituality, and we have been told from birth कि तेरा नसीब तेरे यहाँ माथे पर लिखा हुआ है और तेरी जिंदगी उसमें ही गुजरेगी, तो वो बदल नहीं पाएगा कभी भी. और इसलिए हमने ये तय कर लिया है कि जो मेरे साथ होता है वो मेरे माथे पर लिखा हुआ है ना, छठी के लेख में लिख दिया गया था, मैं उसको बदल नहीं सकता. इसलिए हम लोग उसके साथ जिंदा रहते हैं. एक बार मैं एक सेमिनार में था, वहां एक बहुत सीनियर इकोनॉमिस्ट ने आके ये कहा था कि अगर तुम किसी गरीब को मदद करते हो, उसको कोई सहायता देते हो, तो तुम पापी हो जाते हो और तुम्हें उसकी सजा मिलेगी, क्योंकि उसकी गरीबी उसके पिछले जन्मों के पापों का प्रायश्चित है. भगवान ने उसको गरीब बना के भेजा है ताकि वो पिछले जन्मों का पाप का प्रायश्चित करे. इसलिए अगर आप उसकी सहायता करोगे तो आप उसको जो उस प्रायश्चित की पीड़ा होनी चाहिए उससे बचाते हो और भगवान की इच्छा से विरुद्ध जाते हो, इसलिए तुम्हें वो पापी बनाएगा. And I got so annoyed that day. I got up and I said, I hope you rot in hell, sir, for even considering to say this. मैंने मेरे स्पीच में ये कहा, उनको बहुत बुरा लगा, पर मैंने ये कहा कि मैं प्रार्थना करता हूं कि तुम्हें नरक की यातना इसी जन्म में भुगतनी पड़े. जब ये मेंटालिटी हमारे में होती है तो फिर हम इनइक्वालिटीज की बात क्यों करें? हमने तो वो एक्सेप्ट कर ली.
Thank you so much. And I guess all good things come to a pause.
Yes.
You can continue to read about Bapu if you are inspired by listening to Tusharji. I must tell you at this point in time that Tusharji was sharing with us in a lighter vein that between today and tomorrow, he would have addressed about 15 webinars. That's how busy he was on the occasion of Gandhi Jayanti.
The next one is starting in 15 minutes.
And that's exactly why I had promised Tusharji that we in BMA are very punctual. We start on time, we close on time, but I'm sure the learning will continue for a lifetime. Thank you so much, Tusharji, for this inspirational session.
Thank you very much. I'm so grateful to all of you, to my family, the Dharam Bharti family, and to BMA. And,
absolutely.
To all of you, my greetings and my sincere appreciation of all your work and all that you're doing.
Thank you. And when we thought the only way to get you despite this busy schedule is aapko ghar bulaye, to aap ghar aaye hain to DBM, and now BMA is part of the extended family.
बस इसमें एक ही कमी रह गई है कि जब भी BMA का प्रोग्राम होता है तो फरीन जी हमको सब बहुत डिलीशियस चीजें खिलाती है. ये टेक्नोलॉजी इतनी निकम्मी है कि वो खाना हम तक नहीं पहुंच रहा है.
चलिए, we will make that also happen sometime when the things are much better.
Absolutely.
As usual, may I request everybody, we can take 2 minutes to put on our videos so that we can capture this moment we spent with Tusharji and the entire DBM family and the BMA family on this very special occasion of Gandhi Jayanti. So please put on your videos. I have my colleagues from the BMA Secretariat, Toimi, Lakshmi, who will do the honors. Put on your best smiles. Please give them 2-3 minutes. We need some digital patience. We have 3 screens to cover. So keep smiling and be part of this memory that we are capturing of the wonderful time that we spent together today.
Thank you.
While most of us know who are BMA members and our colleagues, our next session, Gandhi Jayanti special today, is on how to develop inner immunity. And this is by the famous Vedanta expert, Srimati Jaya Rao. And that program starts at 4:30. You'll have to take the trouble of moving from one digital room to another digital room. So you have a tea coffee break of 15 minutes. And 4:30 is when that program is scheduled. So looking forward to having us continue this learning journey using Vedanta to develop inner immunity.
Thank you. Thank you. And
thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Tusharji. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Professor Mani. We'll take a...
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Paramjit Singh Ji. Thank you, Farid, for joining us. And thanks to all our past presidents, committee members, all of them who've been here to make this session so very enjoyable and interesting. As I said, we sign off for a couple of minutes. As they used to say, this is our interval. 4:30 baje ko dobara milenge for the next session in the next screen, if I may say so. Stay
Thank you. Bye-bye.
blessed, everybody. Thank you very much.